Hi, this is Steven Haylestrom coming to you from Peterborough, 92.7 Trent Radio, and welcome to Let's Talk Housing. This is airing live on September 25th, Monday at 9 a.m., and we'll go out to all you Trent Radio people. Glad to have you here. This is my second broadcast, and will also be available as a podcast. And I'm so happy to be here. Thank you to Trent Radio for allowing me this opportunity. Today, we're going to talk about a couple of things. The first half, really, I wanted to talk about kind of the alternatives. What I've said is the idea of this program is really to talk about housing, not only the problems. We know there's problems. Peterborough basically has a zero vacancy rate for rental units. Housing prices are 40% higher than they were even 3.5 years ago. Um, there's more and more people wanting to move to the area, so the pressure on Peterborough, a small city, is as much or more than the pressure for housing on larger municipalities like our neighbor, the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area, or Ottawa, or out west in Western Canada, or virtually anywhere in Canada and anywhere in the United States as well. So housing is in crisis everywhere. And today, and as I introduced myself last week, you know that this is, finding financially accessible is what I like to call it rather than affordable, but financially accessible housing, I feel, is a right for every person in our country, every person in the world. And really, it's my passion to try and do what I can to create that housing. I am in the construction world, kind of a specialized part of the construction world, but I'm going to leave that on its own. This is not meant to be, talking about me. It's really about housing, but I certainly am considered an expert in my particular field in housing, and I do understand housing, what it takes to build housing, what it takes to manage and develop communities. I understand very clearly what it takes to do those things. And so for me, I really feel that I am quite well suited to talk and to discuss with people a variety of different topics around housing. And that's what I want to do. So if anybody out there listening, either to the live broadcast or to the podcast, and you would like to participate and be interviewed or talk or tell your story, I love stories. Tell your story about housing and how difficult it's been, or maybe how wonderful it is, and where, hey, it works for you because you did this or that. I want to hear those stories. Please reach out to me. My phone number, cell phone 647-390-9036. I know, bold, telling that on a podcast and a radio show, but there you go. I'll take a chance. My email is Steven, Steven, at Haylestrom, like my last name, HAYLESTROM.com. Steven at Haylestrom.com. Please reach out. I would love to talk to you. Or maybe just, on your phone, record a little audio message and text it to me. Tell me your story. Doesn't have to be long. It can be short, just how difficult it was. Last week, our first broadcast, we had a couple of guests, and the first one was a young lady, Sahara, which I want to be more transparent here. Sahara also is my oldest daughter, Sahara Haylestrom, And I should have mentioned that in the broadcast. But, I was then reminded by my wife, hey, Stephen, be transparent. Make sure everybody knows who everybody is. And Sahara was my oldest daughter. She lives with her partner in Toronto. And she had some very interesting things to talk about. Especially, I was intrigued, and we have talked before about it, about the challenges that people of her age bracket, who are professionals or who are finished their university. She's 28, so they're just finishing, and they still have challenges trying to find. She indicated in the interview last week she is paying 50% using 50% of her salary, her take home pay, 50% of it to pay half of the cost of her unit that her and her partner rent in downtown Toronto. And I've been there. It's 500 square feet. It's a nice apartment, nice area, like, very downtown for sure. But I tell you, putting 50% for half the cost, that impedes your ability to just carry on. Secondly, the other interesting thing that she mentioned and talked about was what people were doing, like some of her friends, like and what the cost is, and what is being rented in the GTA, and I believe in Peterborough and in smaller cities as well. What's happening? I live in a very small town, and very small municipality, and again, the rental vacancy availability is less than 1%. There are very few places that are available, and it's difficult to find proper housing. So with all of that said, really what I want to focus on for the first part of today, and then the second part, I have a very interesting guest who, again, transparent. His name is Jerry Gardner, and Jerry is my brother-in-law, and he lives in Sudbury, Ontario. And Jerry, interestingly, is a landlord. He owns, I think, three different houses in Sudbury and rents them out. And he's going to talk about kind of the other side of things and how it is sometimes for landlords. And certainly, as you'll hear when you hear my discussion with him, it's certainly not the way it is for every landlord. But we have to realize that some people are the problems around the cost of everything can be in all sorts of areas. Anyway, back to our discussion today. Today, really, what I want to do is talk about some alternative housing options for people who may find it challenging to afford traditional housing. So, what can you do if you're not making enough money, or you don't have available, it's not available, what are some of the things that you can go out and try and look at? And then over the coming weeks, I'm going to try to get into more detail on these and other specific topics and try and bring people in to talk about these options when those options are needed. So, in no particular order, I'm just going to talk about kind of the top 10 things first off. First one is kind of an interesting thing. It's co-housing communities. So a co-housing community, for those of you who haven't heard of it, is a community that's planned residential community where people have their own private spaces, but also have some shared areas, and it's kind of an advanced roommate sort of thing. And co-housing communities, and they are communities, that's why they use that. So they're not as popular now as they were a number of years ago, like in the 80s, even the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, they were certainly a little bit more popular. I have friends who have certainly talked about the idea, and the important word in all of this is community. So usually co-housing groups come together based on their mutual or some sort of mutual thing that they all have together. Like it might be they all are musicians, they all are artists, and certainly art co-housing communities are probably the biggest sector of co-housing communities. Either physical arts, meaning painting, sculpture, etc., or music. Because if you think about it, also you think about people who want to follow those professions, they will be struggling sometimes the most with being able to afford things the way regular working people do, because because often in the arts your pay, you can be working full time or more than full time and still not be making really a living wage, right? And being a musician myself, and not anymore, certainly not a full time musician, is that the challenge is that doing your art or doing your music sometimes doesn't just give you the same amount of economic benefit as working as an engineer or working as a doctor or working at McDonald's or working for the city or working in a factory or whatever it is. So the idea of a co-housing community is that you'll have your own private space, and it could be just a bedroom or a bedroom and a sitting area or something like that, and then you'll have shared spaces. So a shared kitchen, shared bathroom, although sometimes you have your own bathroom, and but then it almost works like a condominium where everybody gets together, and together as a community you make decisions. And often in co-housing communities, the community itself votes on adding a new member to that community, right? So the pros, the positive things are shared responsibility, sense of community, lower costs. The the cons, the difficult things really are limited privacy, shared decision making, shared decision making. So why is that a con? Well, because it can be complex. You know, as soon as you have two people trying to make a decision, it becomes more complex, more challenging. So, number two are tiny homes. Now, tiny homes today are really on the boom. There was a new law that was brought into existence in the province of Ontario last November, and there are laws that are changing all across North America to improve the availability of tiny homes. And I'm not a big fan of the word tiny home because it's not used. I'm a person who understands the building code, and it's not really a term for a real thing, but that's fine. People call them tiny homes, and that's good. But right now, the big thing is talking about ADUs, ADU, or ARU, which is additional dwelling unit or additional residential unit. And that's because the governments are putting into legislation the ability for homeowners to add small ADUs and put them in their backyards or on their properties so that they can then accommodate and to the add to the availability of rental space in a particular area. And certainly the idea of and they're usually they're well, right now most are being site built, meaning the people, it's just like a regular construction project. They come, you look at the architectural drawings, you do that, and you look at it, and then somebody builds a little building in your backyard, and it's usually less than 400 square feet, so like a small one bedroom, and then you can rent it out. One of the challenges is that the prices for these are still pretty high, and so meaning like 150, 200, $250,000. So adding that to your existing house is pretty expensive. There are companies now that are moving towards making more standardized types of units where they can be more easily, they're built in a factory and then put in your backyard. So it's much faster, much easier, and it might be $100,000, which for most homeowners they can afford pretty quick, pretty easily, and then they can then rent that out, and they make more than what their rent will cover, more than what it would cost them to add that to their mortgage or to get an additional mortgage for it. And so these tiny homes or ADUs become quite advantageous. So as they continue to grow, like in California, these same laws were changed about 2 years ago now, and now they're adding ADUs at a tremendous rate in California, like thousands every month, because it's a quick, easy fix for adding new, especially rental units. And then there's also a big, boom also on that they can be set up as communities so that you can have a group of these small homes. If you have a larger piece of land, you can group together 5 or 6 or 10 of these together and create a community where everybody has their own separate space, their own bedrooms, their own washrooms, their own kitchens, but they can act as a community. And those are something that is also moving ahead quite well. The last thing about ADUs is like the pros. So it gives rental income that offsets the mortgage payments. The difficult thing is that it creates a management responsibility, and there's an initial investment required, right? So the homeowner has to manage that rental person. And as you'll hear in the interview a little bit later, managing rental people can be a bit of a challenge sometimes. Okay, so the third thing is what some people call house hacking. So this involves buying a multi-unit property, living in one unit, and renting out the others. So there, um, it definitely takes investment up front in order to get that, right? But if you can somehow, if you have a rich uncle, you have somebody who can give you the money for the down payment, then what you can do is then own the home and rent out parts of either the home or a multifamily home. And it brings me to number 4, actually, which is renting a room, because the other thing you can do is buy a house with 4 bedrooms, live in one, and rent out the other 3 as a way to be able to pay the mortgage, because the mortgage ends up being so high. And that's what part of the whole problem is. Because of the such high prices for housing, then your mortgage gets so high, your ability to even find a down payment is challenging, to say the least. Now, the next thing is just renting a room, right? So that's something that a lot of people do. They rent a single room in a larger house or an apartment, right? And it certainly is a quick way to do it, and it lowers your cost. Utilities are often included, but you have limited privacy and shared common areas. And unlike the co-housing community, these are not people that you know or you choose to live with or who have chosen you to live with, and so that makes it more challenging. Now, the next thing that comes to mind, and it's more of either a short-term solution, really, and even more limited privacy, but there are hostels. So hostels offer a dormitory-style room. Now, interestingly, even with our real housing crisis, many municipalities still limit the ability for people to offer this type of hostel type dormitory style living, right? So often municipalities will restrict. These are often called, or they used to be called in the old days, rooming houses, right? And in fact, my great grandmother owned a giant rooming house in downtown Toronto on Walmer Road called Adams House. It was at 44 Walmer Road, and it had, I think it had, if I remember right, 32 bedrooms. It was a mansion, and that's how she made her living. That's how she survived and grew her family, was by renting rooms. Now, today it's often associated with some pretty bad actors, and I'll cover that more later on. And it can be challenging, but it still has its place. It can be very affordable. It has a social environment, and you know it can be good. And that's hostels. Number 6 is an interesting one that I don't think is really even utilized as much as it could be, and that's work for rent arrangements. Okay, so you can find out, you can advertise that you're available. You can do that, especially if you're in areas, or in areas where some sort of work might be needed, like some sort of landscaping, like maybe somebody who's living in the country and they have an extra room. Offer, well, I'll pay half what you're looking for in the rent, but I will mow the lawn and look after the garden and et cetera, et cetera. And in my previous life, I used to be an organic farmer. And one of the things that my wife and I did, because we had 100 acres and we had a lot of vegetables in there, so what we would do is we would bring in people who are called woofers, and you can look that up, willing workers on organic farms. And the whole idea was that these are people who traveled around the world in this particular case, in the way that they existed. So they would come from, like, we had a couple of young women from Scotland who came one time, and they came from Scotland, and this was their way of traveling around the country. And so they came, worked for us. They did, I forget now how many hours it was, but there was X amount of hours per week, and then they got room and board. Great way to work it out. So it's not used a lot nowadays, but it's possible. The next one, number 7, is probably becoming more used than the work for rent, which is RV or van living, right? So living full time in an RV or a converted van. This, you can even go to YouTube and you'll see people who are doing this, right? They're driving around. The challenge is that you need to find a place to park. Although, hey, I'm told Walmart, you can park your RV there anytime. But it's not quite as simple or idyllic as it may seem. But it's an existence. It's a way to survive. It's not the easiest way to get a shower or to use, if you have your indoor toilet in the RV, or you have to find a toilet. There are certain things that are very difficult, but it's possible. It's possible. Okay. And check YouTube. You'll see there's lots of people who are doing it. Usually they're doing it and not working or not going to school. They're not generally staying in one place. They are generally traveling around and doing, using this as a way to just to limit expenses when they're traveling. Not the same as somebody who wants to be in one place. And next one, number 8, really is communal living. Communal living is a little bit different than our other one, which co-housing, because communal living really is just a group of people sharing space and responsibilities. So you do get it's just that they don't have a particular thing that's holding them all together, but instead it's just they just put an ad out. We're looking for more people. And then number 9 is another one that's difficult, but people resort to it, which is squatting. Okay, and you may have heard that or seen it on television or seen it on some sort of program and where or on the news where people will squat. They will go and live somewhere, occupy an abandoned property. It's illegal in many places, and there's no ownership rights, and you can get kicked out by the police, and there's a variety of different challenges. Not something I would recommend, that's for sure. The other one is the last one in this list is government and non-profit programs. So there's various programs out there offering housing assistance to low-income individuals and families. But I can tell you right now, the problem with this is that the lists are long. I heard the new mayor of Toronto talking about this just after she took over, and she was talking about there being 82,000 people in the wait list, on the wait list for that are already approved, meaning their income has been proven that they meet the income criteria for low income family. 82,000 people and families that were looking for low income housing. Wow. That is incredible, and it's sad, and it is all sorts of different things all at the same time, and it's really unbelievable that our society can't do better and be able to somehow or another help the individuals, the people of our community, our citizens, our humans, with being able to better find housing than to have 82,000 qualified people waiting on that wait list. So I think this is as good a time as any for me to introduce my first guest. And as I said during my last few minutes here, this gentleman, his name is Jerry Gardner. He's from Sudbury, Ontario. He also happens to be my brother-in-law. And during the early days of this show, I am going to be utilizing the friends and family parts in order to have guests. And as I've said, if you would like to participate, please let me know. And anyway, here we go. This is going to be me and Jerry Gardner.
Today we have Jerry. Jerry is on the phone with me. He's from Sudbury, Ontario. And Sudbury, I know our program here comes from Peterborough. Sudbury and Peterborough are very similar in a variety of different ways. Besides population, they both have universities, etc. They're very similar demographics. And I really want to welcome Jerry to our program today to Let's Talk Housing. And Jerry, to give you kind of a little background, what we do is we like to talk to people about, our main thing, first off, is to talk about the effect of not having enough housing and not having affordable housing for people, how that affects all of us and our community in general. Do you find that there is an effect in Sudbury?
Oh, there's a great shortage of housing here in Sudbury as well as everywhere else. We have people that are living in tents, just the fact that they cannot find housing.
And so it's just kind of like regular people. It's not, like everybody kind of has an idea of what a homeless person is, right? And it sounds like these aren't really like typical homeless. Is that right?
No. Some of the people temporarily found themselves like in separation. Like a friend of mine separated from his wife, nowhere to go, and for a while was finding himself in the shelters or in a tent as well. So just the fact that he couldn't find anything for quite a few weeks before he managed to to find somewhere to live. So it can happen to anybody at any time. Something happens to their current situation and find themselves homeless.
Boom. Yeah. And how is it? Do you find that in Sudbury that the price of housing is a lot higher? Like, are people suffering from? Is that what pushing people out? The affordability of housing, like the ability to buy a house yourself?
Well, there's a couple of factors why housing here in Sudbury. We have a couple colleges and a couple of universities, and then we have a high number of international students that have come. So they're taking a large group of houses and homes as well, and the fact that the contractors, all they care about is building the high-end homes and really nothing in the middle class range at all.
Right. So they're building expensive custom homes and nothing, no rental.
Yeah, even the rental, like they're talking about building like 400 and something units here in Sudbury down at Beachfront. These are ocean view, not ocean view, but lakefront homes. Going to be very high rent because it's right at the beach, and so it's not really taking any of the people that are looking for housing on very low income won't be able to afford those places at all. So they just keep building for the high end people. Now the city here now is giving 10 years tax free if they build some, as one of their new proposals here in this city. I think they're doing. I think they're going about it the wrong way though here in our city. But yeah, I think if they give the money to people that own houses, they can probably find people that will put apartments and that into their home and give them an incentive that way. And there'll be a lot more homes converted a lot more quickly because there's a shortage of contractors wanting to build. So a lot of people can do those renovations on their own in their house with the proper permits and everything, and do the conversion to help do a quick. Right now I feel we need a quick fix on the housing situation than a long-term goal down the road. And
right, and that makes a lot of sense because it's urgent, right? So just trying to like today the federal government announced they're taking 5%, taking the HST off purpose-built rental buildings, right? But the problem is that will make them less expensive to build. But the problem is that's really years away before the impact of that will actually be felt because it takes that long, it takes so long for most municipalities to even get a building permit, a site permit to build anything.
Yeah, I agree that we need a quick fix now. These people need somewhere to live now. There's it's just driving the price up on everything. It's driving the price up on the apartment units and also the price of housing. I'll give you an example. When I first bought my house, like one of my houses, one unit would pay for that place's mortgage, and now when I did the calculation, if I were to sell the house and rebuy it back myself and took the mortgage out all over again at today's value of the house, both units would not even, it's a duplex, both units would not even cover the mortgage payment. And I'm comparing, you say, well, the interest rates are high. When I first bought my house, mortgage rates were at 10-11%. So when I took my mortgage out for my first time, So they were a lot higher, and one rental unit covered the mortgage. Now 2 of them barely does it, and the interest rates are half of what it was back in the 90s.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the whole interest rate thing, people are, very upset about, like 7% interest rates when, yes, you're right. Like 90s, it was, it's in the early 90s, it was 17%.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I guess the difference now is, though, that the price of housing has gone up so high.
Yeah. So now you're talking very high rent to cover that cost. And even if I compare it to way back then, one rental unit would cover that rent, and it wasn't really outrageous rent, not to compare to now. And now 2 units barely cover the same thing when I crunch the numbers, just doing the comparison. So that cost needs to come down as well. So more houses need to go onto the market to lower, even if it goes stagnant for a while until people's wages and that catch up to that market.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned that, because I haven't heard it, or I haven't talked to anybody who's talked about that. So you're talking about the fact that we need having more housing on the market will stabilize and lower the price. Would you agree? Yeah.
Oh yeah. If all of a sudden your city or town, whatever, put 10% more houses on, built 10% more houses, there might be a surplus, or actually more houses than what more people could live in. It would drive the housing market down. And right now there's a shortage of builders, and that's it's taking like 2 years for, if an individual wanted to build a house, they're looking at a couple of years probably, in some small areas. I don't know how your market's down here, but to get someone to build you a single home on a lot, you can be looking at 2 years trying to get the contract. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing here. And then you add to that the permit cost. You have a time to get anything built.
Yeah. So and it's a lot bigger. It's a lot bigger problem than what you think. Like part of the problem is, I hate to go back to the international students, but the government, what the internationals did was for them to become Canadians. A lot of these trade jobs are not really appealing because it takes them a long time to get their PRs. Okay, so they rather take a job, even though that they went to school to be a carpenter or whatever, to be a manager at McDonald's or supervisor at Walmart, because that's point wise, that's a lot better. So even though they did the schooling with that, they'll actually turn down the carpentry job so they could get their permanent residency a lot quicker. And I sit on a board at the college, and I discussed that with them. Like they need to change that so they track more people into these trades, because it's not beneficial for all these newcomers to go into that, because it takes 8 to 10 years on average to get your trades license, and they just can't wait 8 to 10 years to get the permanent residency, because that's what they're going to recognize as a job. So for them to get a manager somewhere is a lot easier, a lot quicker.
I had no idea. So you can't, and you have like real experiences, right? Because I know that you rent to a lot of students, right?
Yeah, I rent to a lot of students, and some of them actually went to the trades, and some of them took jobs as managers at hotels, manager at McDonald's, and did not bother pursuing their trades, even though they went to school for trades, they went after their permanent residency, and then are later on going to go revisit their trades job afterward. But the only problem with that is a lot of people, after you're done school, are not looking for people that been out of their course for 2-3 years and coming and then are picking it back up where they left off.
Right. Yeah. So it really, I was not aware of that. Thank you very much for bringing that up. Because they have a big group of international students, and they do have a college specifically for the trades. And I'm wondering, I'm going to try and actually maybe get an interview with somebody at the college to talk about that and see whether that is indeed a challenge for them. Because, people come and they want to go to school and become, and work in the trades, and then they can't, So, not that they can't, but they can't get their PR, and the PR leads to citizenship. So it would slow everything down. So like a wage, a minimum, a manager at McDonald's might not be minimum wage, but it's less than a carpenter. And we need more carpenters in the workforce than we need managers at McDonald's. And not trying to pick on McDonald's here, but managers.
No, I'm not trying to pick on McDonald's at all. I just don't think McDonald's is having a shortage on getting their workers.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And no, I don't think they are either. And so I touched just briefly on the fact that you're, and I didn't say at the beginning, but I do know that you are a landlord too, right? Like you own a couple of houses and have for a number of years in Sudbury. So landlords right now are getting a bad name, right? Like a lot is being blamed, especially down here in the South, on the landlords. They're kicking people out. They're making millions. So what's it really like as a landlord?
Well, for me, I don't rent anywhere near what market rent is going for. I don't evict for the purpose of jacking up rent, but I do see that sometimes the government itself is to blame, like for that. So right now, give you an example. In my other house, I make maybe a couple $100 out of the 2 units a month after I pay all the expenses, and I really don't have a mortgage much left on the place. I just have like a home improvement loan left. So it's not like it's paying my mortgage at all. I have very little left to pay down, and I have very little money left over. So, but if you looked, the landlords went through with COVID a few years free. Then the last few years they're only giving us half of the inflation rate. So over the course of so many years, we're behind 15-20%, and then someone that's fresh with a mortgage, they're actually basically paying people to live in their place as a result, because they're taking money out of their pocket to subsidize the house. And I could see someone in a predicament like that where they want to get someone out so they can recoup the money that they lost, because the government's did a few zero increases, and then it was like 2.5, but inflation was 6.8, and they put a cap of no more than 5, and only giving us half of the actual. And right in the last few years, have been only giving us half of the 5, even if inflation was over 5. So they capped us at basically 2.5%, and yet the bills are still going up. And my units, I pay all the bills in it. So it's not like the tenant's rent is not even keeping up to the bills are going up higher than what I'm allowed to raise the rent by.
Right. So are there now? I know you're a decent guy, and you, like you said, you charge either at or below the market, and you're a decent landlord. There are places where landlords do take advantage. Would you agree? Even in Sudbury, there are places where that happens?
Yes. Yeah. There was definitely where people take advantage of that and charge maximum rent and they'll actually move into the place for a year. They'll just to make sure that they'll get the market. They'll be able to raise the rent up to market rent, and they'll evict the people in the place. I some of them I see why, because their mortgage renewed and whatever, and they just can't afford the new payment. So I see it on both sides. Yeah. Maybe the government should put a freeze on people that have mortgages that are renting out to help keep the rent low. If they keep the rent low, and if they did that, then maybe it would also encourage the people to put more rental places in their homes as well.
Right, and one of the other. Sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, so that'd be like an incentive for people to put apartments and make a duplex in their places. Like we need something really something really quick to do this, and contractors are not going to do it. That to fill that gap, I think if you allow the homeowners to do it as a temporary fix, that would get people into
somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you one last question, so I don't keep you too much longer. But if you could wave a magic wand and make, say, even one or two changes to help to solve this challenge, what do you think they would be? You mentioned quick fixes and that sort of thing. Is that what you think? Or anyway, I'll let you answer the question. What do you think?
As a first quick fix, allow homeowners to put places, give them an incentive to put to rent out a space in their place, regardless of zoning bylaws and parking thing.
Restrictions,
restrictions. So remove some of the restrictions. Allow them to do that. And then if you still want, the city still wants it, then allow like a 25-year variance or whatever on it, and so that will get a lot of these people into affordable places, and then correct the issue with the shortage in building and
start building
long term. Start building more. You got to correct. You got to correct that. That's the true thing, but that's not going to correct overnight.
Right.
So
Well,
that's
thank you. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the two things that I would do.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and I'm going to wrap things up there, Jerry. And thank you so much for your time. I will send you a link so you can listen to the whole program when it comes out. It will be live, it'll be broadcast at 9 a.m, and I'll send you the time. But then there's going to be a podcast version as well, and I'll just send you those links. And I really appreciate your time and concern, and thank you very much for your contribution. Really appreciate it. And enjoy Sudbury. It's a rocky place, man.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
Hi. Okay, that's Jerry. Wow, I really need to learn to not say and ah more and more. I don't even realize. I don't know, maybe nobody realizes that until they actually hear themselves over and over saying and ah. Anyway, okay, well, we are back, and that's our interview for this week. And we are going to be wrapping up shortly. Well, actually, we've got a few minutes left. However, what I really wanted to talk about at the end of the show today is, the unfortunate reality is that when all the other options are exhausted, some people end up sleeping rough or experiencing homelessness. However, it's important to note that there are still some avenues, some other places where individuals can explore to avoid living on the street, right? So, living rough, there are a few individuals who this seems to suit. And now it just seems that more and more people, a number of years ago, I ran a small, I ran in part of I ran to help what's called NAMI Res, Native Men's Residence in Toronto, and I ran one night looking after the food supply and then distributing food and warm beverages and things to homeless people in Toronto. And during that time, not only did I get to know the people who were on the street, but also I got to know, you know, what was going on for them. And it was really quite eye-opening because in the news and everything else, in the news and in the media, there's a lot of time spent talking about the homeless problem and the idea that if you're homeless, it's your own fault. And but for the grace of whoever your creator is, but for the grace of that creator, don't we all just that short step away from homelessness? And I can't go a single week in this program without talking about the population dealing with real homelessness, real lack of housing. And included in those are also underhoused people, people who are, the number of homeless people are really underreported because it's not just people on the street. It's people who may be couch surfing from one place to another. They may be, they may be occasionally using emergency housing. They may be working with a religious group or a charitable organization to find just temporary day-to-day housing. And often it involves you get a place to sleep, but then you have nowhere to spend the day. You don't have an address. You don't have all of those things that help to make you a regular human being that then can go and try and find a job if you want. And then what can very unfortunately happen, as I'm sure many of my listeners here today know, is that it's a slippery slope. There's a movie I remember, I don't know the name of it or anything, but one of the scenes is a man outside and he's wandering around talking to himself going, "It's raining on my furniture, it's raining on my furniture." And it's a scene that was basically about a person who was then evicted from their home, from their apartment, because they couldn't pay their rent. Their furniture had been put out onto the street, and it was raining, and then the emotional strain that was causing. And then what happens, unfortunately, with this slippery slope is that you then start sliding. So, okay, you can't afford your rent. You try to afford your rent. And you just heard in Jerry's explanation there, and he since then has called me and talked to me about and sent me information about this, cash for keys, the idea that people will rent and then they won't leave. until they get money, because it's so hard for landlords to get them out of the houses that they're in or the apartments that they're in. So it's all such a terrible mess that you then are on the street. You find yourself on the street for all sorts of different reasons. And then, depression sets in, loneliness sets in, challenges set in. Then, if you didn't have a drug problem before, maybe you start to. If you weren't committing crimes, maybe you start to. It's just so challenging for people to be able to survive. Many years ago, when I was working in British Columbia building transitional housing, I was talking to the British Columbia, to the BC Housing organization, the vice president of BC Housing, and to the mayor of Vancouver's executive assistants, and we talked. There's a simple answer to homelessness. And are you ready? Maybe everybody listening out there already knows the answer. It's very simple. Homes. We need to build homes. This is Let's Talk Housing, and certainly I want to emphasize and build on the idea of regular people finding housing. But every week we have to spend some time talking about the people who are below that line. We have the missing middle, where I'm in, where there's a bunch of people, many regular Canadians, many regular people around the world are in there. They can't afford their housing. But there is the other group below that missing middle who then have not been able to keep their housing, lost their job, separated in their family, a death in the family, something. They became addicted, and if they became addicted, it's a funny thing. People say, well, it's, and I've heard, and unfortunately, you can't see me. There's not a video, but I'm closing my eyes and thinking about the comment. Well, you have to pull up your socks then. It's not like that. People with addictions, whether it be drugs, alcohol, whatever it is, then it's not just about pulling up your socks. It's about more than that. And it's about needing help. And it's about our society providing that help, about us dealing with each other and ensuring that young people, know how to be parents. And they learn how to do that. How to become real in a real society. I mean, right now, people who are in these situations, they do everything. Encampments, like in Peterborough right now, big challenge. Campsite in the downtown Peterborough. Storage unit dwelling. There are strict rules in storage units that you can't, live inside your storage unit, but people do it anyway. There are day shelters. There are vehicle dwellings. This is a common practice too. Where you have a car, you lose your apartment, but you have a car, so you start living in your car. Wow, a tough life. Okay. Well, I don't want to end things on a depressing note, but we are wrapping up our hour now. My name again, Steven Haylestrom. This is 92.7 FM from Trent Radio. Also a podcast. It's called Let's Talk Housing. And we're going to talk housing again and again and again. We want people to know how to and what to do to help themselves with housing. Please reach out to me. My email is Steven@Haylestrom, just like my name. And be glad to talk to you and tell your story on the air and interview you. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a wonderful week. And we will talk to you in a week. Thank you. Take care. Bye for now.